All right, so let's dive into a revolution
Okay.
that's often celebrated as this like shining example of peaceful change.
Mm-hmm.
England's Glorious Revolution of 1688.
Right.
But what if I told you that behind that polished facade of a bloodless transition
Yeah.
lies a much more complex and even unsettling story?
Yeah.
One that includes like fabricated plots and deep-seated religious anxieties and repercussions that stretched far beyond England's borders.
Wow.
Get ready to challenge some assumptions because today we're going beyond the textbook version of the Glorious Revolution.
It's fascinating how certain historical narratives become so ingrained
Right.
that we rarely question them. The
Exactly.
Glorious Revolution is a perfect example of that.
Exactly. And to help us unpack all of this, we've got Professor Ted Valence's book,
Okay.
The Glorious Revolution, 1688, Britain's Fight for Liberty,
Yes.
alongside a really insightful interview with him on the Not Just the Tudors podcast.
Uh-huh.
What really struck me is how Professor Valence emphasizes the long build-up to 1688,
Yeah.
the simmering tensions that were already bubbling away
Right.
long before William of Orange even entered the picture.
It's like a slow-burning fuse, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can trace the roots of the revolution back decades earlier.
Right.
And one event that stands out is the so-called Popish Plot of 1678.
Okay, the Popish Plot.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds like something straight out of a historical thriller.
It does.
Give us the rundown.
Okay.
What was it, and why was it so significant?
Well, imagine this.
Okay.
A magistrate found dead under mysterious circumstances.
Oh, wow.
Whispers of Catholic assassins plotting to kill King Charles II,
Hmm.
and a wave of paranoia sweeping across Protestant England.
Wow.
That was the Popish Plot in a nutshell,
Okay.
except there was one major problem.
What's that?
It was all a lie.
Wait, a complete
A
fabrication?
complete fabrication.
How on earth did that gain any traction?
It was orchestrated by a man named Titus Oates,
Okay.
who spun this elaborate web of lies, claiming to have uncovered a vast Catholic conspiracy to seize control of England.
Mm-hmm.
And as outlandish as his accusations were,
Yeah.
they tapped into a very real and deep-seated fear within English society at the time.
It's fear of Catholicism, right?
That's right.
But was it really that widespread?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to remember the historical context.
Come on.
In the 17th century, England was a predominantly Protestant nation
Right.
that had endured decades of religious and political turmoil,
Mm-hmm.
including a civil war fought in part over religious differences.
Right.
The idea of a Catholic monarch returning to the throne was a terrifying prospect for many.
So even though the Popish Plot was a hoax,
Yeah,
it exposed this raw nerve within English society,
right.
this deep-seated anxiety about Catholicism.
Exactly.
It's amazing how something completely fabricated could have such a profound impact
Oh, no, it's incredible.
on the course of history.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
a testament to the power of fear
Right.
and how easily it can be manipulated, especially when it plays on existing prejudices and anxieties.
Right.
And this brings us to the reign of James II,
Okay.
who ascended to the throne in 1685
Mm-hmm.
after the death of his brother Charles II.
Okay, so James II, a devout Catholic,
Yes.
takes the throne.
He does.
I'm guessing this didn't exactly ease the anxieties stirred up by the Popish Plot.
Not at all.
Right.
In fact, James II's reign poured fuel on that fire.
Okay.
While he initially promised to uphold the Church of England,
Right.
his actions quickly revealed his determination to advance the cause of Catholicism in England.
He wasn't exactly subtle about it, was he?
No, he wasn't.
What kind of actions are we talking about here?
Well, for one, he appointed Catholics to key positions in government and the military positions that had long been held exclusively by Protestants.
Mm,
This sparked outrage among the Protestant elite,
yeah.
who saw it as a direct assault on their power and privilege.
So it wasn't just abstract religious differences at play here.
No.
It was also about power. Who held it
Exactly.
and who felt threatened by the changing landscape.
Exactly.
Did James II face any pushback for these actions?
He did.
Okay.
But he seemed determined to push forward with his agenda.
Really?
He issued royal declarations of indulgence,
Okay.
essentially suspending laws that discriminated against Catholics.
Oh, wow.
This was seen as a direct challenge to the authority of Parliament,
Mm-hmm.
which had long been dominated by Protestants.
It sounds like James II was walking a tightrope.
He was.
trying to balance his personal faith with the political realities
Right.
of a deeply divided nation.
Yeah, very difficult situation.
But then to make matters even more complicated,
Yes.
something happens over in France that throws another wrench into the works.
Yes, okay.
The revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685 by Louis XIV.
Okay.
This was a major turning point,
Okay.
not just for France, but for the entire European landscape.
Right.
And it had a direct impact on the events unfolding in England. Okay, so for those of us who need a quick refresher,
Sure.
what was the Edict of Nantes
Okay.
and what did its revocation mean?
The Edict of Nantes, issued back in 1598, had granted religious freedom to Huguenots,
Right.
French Protestants,
Yeah.
within a largely Catholic France.
Okay.
Louis XIV's decision to revoke it effectively ended that toleration,
Wow.
leading to the persecution of Huguenots
Right.
and a mass exodus from France.
So you've got Protestant refugees fleeing persecution in France,
Yes.
seeking refuge in England,
Right.
and arriving at a time when England's own Catholic king
Yeah.
is actively trying to empower Catholics.
It's quite ironic, isn't it?
The irony is almost palpable, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a striking example of how international events can have a ripple effect on domestic politics.
Right.
And for English Protestants, the situation in France confirmed their worst fears
Right?
about what a Catholic monarch might do.
Mm-hmm.
They saw Louis XIV, a powerful and absolute ruler, as a model for James II, and they feared that England was heading down a similar path toward Catholic domination.
Oh.
And those fears were further heightened when James II appointed Catholics
Uh-huh.
to prominent positions within the Church of England itself.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the outrage among devout Anglicans
Right.
when they saw their own church,
Yeah.
the very symbol of English Protestantism,
Right.
being infiltrated by those they perceived as a threat to their faith.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's one thing to appoint Catholics to, like, secular roles,
Right.
but to bring them into the heart of the Church of England,
Yeah.
that must have felt like a betrayal to many.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just about abstract religious doctrine. These appointments had very real implications
Go on.
for the distribution of power and privilege within English society. The Church of England controlled vast wealth and influence,
Right.
and by giving Catholics a foothold within the institution,
Right.
James II was essentially challenging the established order.
It's almost as if he was intentionally poking the bear,
Yeah.
knowing that it would provoke a strong reaction.
Yeah, he wasn't exactly shy about it.
But surely he must have realized the risks involved.
You would think.
Was he so blinded by his faith
Well,
that he couldn't see the growing opposition he was creating?
Professor Valence suggests that James II might have misjudged the situation.
Okay.
He seems to have believed that he could gradually reintroduce Catholicism
Right.
without triggering a major backlash, but he underestimated the depth of anti-Catholic sentiment in England.
Yeah.
And then in 1688,
Okay.
an event occurred that completely changed the game.
What's that?
The birth of James II's son.
Ah, yes, the heir to the throne.
That's right.
This was a turning point, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Up until this point, James II's Protestant daughter Mary
Right.
was the heir presumptive.
Okay.
Many Protestants, while uneasy about James II's reign, consoled themselves with the thought that Mary would eventually inherit the throne and restore the Protestant monarchy.
Right, right.
But the birth of a Catholic son changed everything.
Wow.
It raised the specter of a Catholic dynasty,
Yeah.
a prospect that was simply unacceptable to many in England.
So you have this growing sense of unease and anxiety among Protestants,
Right.
fueled by James II's actions and the events in France.
Exactly.
And then, boom, a Catholic heir is born.
A Catholic heir is born.
It's like all the ingredients for a political explosion were now in place.
We're all there.
And it's at this critical juncture that a new player enters the scene,
Yeah.
William of Orange.
Enter William of Orange, stage left, so to speak.
Right.
Now, William was no stranger to English affairs.
Okay.
He was the stadtholder of the Dutch Republic,
Right.
a powerful figure in European politics, and most importantly,
Yeah.
he was married to James II's daughter, Mary.
Okay, so he's got family ties to England.
He does.
He's a powerful figure in his own right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm assuming he's a Protestant.
That he is a Protestant.
This makes him a pretty appealing alternative to James II, doesn't it?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Professor Valence highlights the fact that William had been in communication with
Well-
various English political figures
Yeah.
for quite some time.
Really?
They saw him as a potential savior, someone who could rescue England from what they perceived as the looming threat
Yeah.
of Catholic tyranny.
So it wasn't just a random coincidence
No, it wasn't a
that
coincidence.
William suddenly decided to intervene.
It wasn't a coincidence at all.
There were people actively working behind the scenes
There were.
to bring him to England.
That's right.
Exactly. It was a carefully orchestrated plan
Was.
driven by a combination of political maneuvering and genuine fear.
Exactly.
And William Ever, the shrewd strategist,
Yes,
played his cards masterfully.
he did.
He framed his intervention not as a foreign invasion or a power grab,
Right.
but as a mission to protect English liberties and the Protestant religion.
That was his spin.
It's fascinating how he managed to spin the narrative in his favor.
It is.
But how did James II react to all of this?
Well,
Surely he must have seen the writing on the wall.
he did, but by then it was almost too late.
Right.
He had alienated so many of his key supporters,
Mm-hmm.
even within his own family,
Right.
that his position had become increasingly untenable.
Okay.
His attempts to backtrack on some of his pro-Catholic policies,
Right.
likely suggested by advisors panicking at William's looming arrival, came across as weak and desperate.
Oh, wow.
The conspiracy against him ran deep,
Yeah.
and it included some of those closest to him.
That's incredible. It's like something out of Shakespeare.
It really is.
Betrayal and intrigue at the highest levels of power.
Absolutely.
So what happened next?
What-
Did James II try to fight back against William?
Initially, he did make preparations to resist William's landing,
Okay.
but as William's forces gathered strength and support within England grew, James II's resolve crumbled.
Okay.
He was plagued by illness,
Mhm.
both physical and perhaps mental, given the stress he was under.
Oh, wow.
His army began to desert.
Wow.
Key allies switched sides,
Mhm.
and even his own daughter, Mary, ultimately sided with her husband.
Wow. Talk about a crushing blow.
It must have been devastating.
His own daughter choosing William over him.
Yeah,
That must have been devastating.
yeah.
So what did James II do?
Well,
Did he surrender?
he attempted to flee the country,
Okay.
disguised as a woman,
Wow.
but was captured and returned to London.
Okay.
His capture, however,
Right.
didn't lead to a triumphant return.
Oh,
Instead, he was met with a rather ambivalent public response.
really?
While some rejoiced at his capture,
Wow.
many seemed indifferent,
Yeah.
almost as if his reign had already come to an end in their minds.
It's like the air had gone out of his reign.
Exactly.
He was still technically the king,
Right.
but the power had already shifted.
The power had shifted,
Yeah.
and William, sensing this shift,
Yeah.
subtly pressured James II to leave England for good.
Right.
William didn't want to be seen as a usurper,
Right.
so he needed James II to willingly relinquish the throne.
Right.
And that's precisely what happened.
Okay.
Facing dwindling support and the prospect of further conflict, James II fled to France,
Wow.
leaving the throne vacant.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
A king fleeing his own country,
Freeing his own country.
leaving behind a power vacuum that William of Orange was all too happy to fill.
Yes.
But was this truly an abdication, as it's often portrayed?
That's where things get a bit murky.
Okay.
The English narrative certainly favored the abdication theory,
Right.
presenting it as a smooth and legitimate transfer of power. However,
Yeah.
as Professor Valens points out,
Okay.
the Scottish perspective was quite different.
Oh, really?
Their claim of beg,
Okay.
right? A document similar to the English Bill of Rights,
Right.
explicitly stated that James II had forfeited the throne through his actions.
Ah, so the Scots weren't buying the abdication story.
No, they weren't.
They saw it as a more forceful removal from power.
That's right.
That's a really interesting distinction.
Yeah, it is an interesting distinction.
Yeah.
It highlights the fact that the Glorious Revolution,
Right.
while often viewed as a singular event,
Mm.
was actually experienced and interpreted in different ways throughout the British Isles.
That makes sense.
And this brings us to the English Bill of Rights.
Okay, the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
This is the document that limited the power of the monarchy
Right.
and affirmed the rights of Parliament, right?
That's the traditional interpretation, yes.
Okay.
But Professor Valens suggests that we need to view the Bill of Rights in a more nuanced light.
Okay.
While it did introduce certain limits on the monarchy, it wasn't quite the radical shift in power
Right.
that it's sometimes made out to be.
So it wasn't this clean break from absolute monarchy.
No, not really.
The power dynamics were still being negotiated even after the Glorious Revolution.
That's right.
Absolutely.
The Bill of Rights was as much about establishing a narrative of continuity
Okay.
as it was about enacting sweeping reforms.
Okay.
It presented the revolution as a restoration of ancient rights and liberties
Right.
rather than a radical departure from tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more fascinating
Yeah.
is that the Bill of Rights essentially rewrote recent history,
Okay.
portraying James II's actions as illegal,
Wow.
even though many of them had been upheld in courts at the time.
It's like they were trying to create a legal justification for the revolution after the fact.
Yeah, after the fact.
Shaping the narrative to fit their desired outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that historical documents, even those as revered as the Bill of Rights, are often products of their time, shaped by political agendas
Yeah.
and the desire to legitimize certain actions.
And this brings us to a really important point
Yeah.
that Professor Valance emphasizes throughout his work, the myth of a bloodless revolution.
The myth of a bloodless revolution.
Yes. We've already hinted at this.
Right.
But the idea that the Glorious Revolution was entirely peaceful
Yeah.
simply doesn't hold up when you look beyond England.
It doesn't.
What was happening in Scotland and Ireland during this time.
This is where the narrative of a unified and peaceful transition really starts to break down.
Yeah.
While England may have experienced a relatively smooth transfer of power,
Right.
things were far more turbulent
Okay.
in Scotland and Ireland.
Okay, so let's talk about Scotland first.
All right.
What was happening there during this time?
Well, Professor Valance makes it clear that the events of 1688 weren't universally welcomed.
Right.
In Scotland, there was significant support for James II,
Okay.
particularly among Highland clans who remained loyal to the Stuart monarchy.
Okay.
The removal of James II sparked uprisings,
Okay.
which were met with brutal force by the new government.
So we're talking about actual battles and bloodshed here.
Exactly.
Not just political maneuvering.
There were significant clashes,
Right.
particularly in the Highlands.
Okay.
One notable example is the Battle of Killiecrankie in 1689,
Right.
where Jacobite forces those loyal to James II.
Right.
Initially defeated government troops. However, the Jacobite victory was short-lived,
Okay.
and they were ultimately subdued.
Mm.
These conflicts left deep scars on Scottish society,
Right.
exacerbating existing tensions between the Highlands and the Lowlands.
It's a reminder that even within what we now call Great Britain,
Yeah,
there were deep divisions and loyalties
absolutely.
that transcended religious lines.
Right,
It wasn't simply a case of Protestants versus Catholics.
exactly.
And then there's Ireland,
Yeah,
where the situation was even more complex and tragic.
yeah, much more so.
So tell us about what happened in Ireland.
James II, after fleeing England,
Right.
actually landed in Ireland in 1689, seeking to regain his throne with the support of Irish Catholics.
So the Glorious Revolution, which had been relatively bloodless in England,
Yes,
spilled over into a bloody conflict in Ireland.
yes, it did.
Wow.
The war in Ireland was brutal and devastating, with atrocities committed on both sides. One particularly infamous event is the Siege of Derry,
Okay.
where Protestant inhabitants of the city withstood a prolonged siege by Jacobite forces.
Wow.
The siege became a symbol of Protestant resistance,
Okay.
but it also resulted in immense suffering and loss of life.
It's hard to reconcile this image of brutal warfare
Yeah.
with the narrative of a glorious and bloodless revolution.
It is hard to reconcile those two things.
It seems like the experiences of those in Scotland and Ireland
Yeah.
have been largely overshadowed by the English perspective.
Absolutely.
Right.
Professor Valance argues that the traditional narrative of the Glorious Revolution
Yeah.
has often marginalized the experiences of those who lived outside of England.
Right.
Their stories.
Often filled with violence, displacement, and loss, have been relegated to the footnotes of history.
And the silencing of those voices has real consequences, doesn't it?
I think so.
It shapes our understanding of the past
Right.
and influences how we view events even today.
Absolutely.
If we only focus on the English experience,
Yeah.
we miss a huge part of the story.
Yes, a huge part.
The complexities, the contradictions,
Right.
and the human cost of this revolution.
The human cost, exactly.
And it's important to note that the repercussions of the Glorious Revolution in Ireland, in particular, were felt for generations.
Right.
The victory of William of Orange led to the imposition of penal laws
Right.
which severely restricted the rights of Catholics in Irish society.
They did.
These laws created a system of institutionalized discrimination
Uh-huh.
that fueled resentment and conflict for centuries to come.
For
It
centuries.
was a glorious revolution,
Yes.
while ushering in a new era of parliamentary power in England.
Also laid the groundwork for sectarian division and oppression in Ireland.
It did.
It's a stark reminder that even events celebrated for their progressive outcomes
Yeah.
can have unintended and deeply harmful consequences.
It's a lesson we need to keep in mind as we examine any historical event.
Right.
We need to look beyond the dominant narratives, seek out diverse perspectives,
Yeah.
and acknowledge the complexities and contradictions inherent in the past.
This deep dive has really challenged my understanding of the Glorious Revolution.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's made me realize that what I thought was a straightforward story
Yeah,
of progress and liberation
right.
is actually far more nuanced and frankly unsettling.
It is.
But I also think it's incredibly important
I agree.
to engage with these uncomfortable truths, to confront the darker sides of history,
Right.
even when they challenge our preconceived notions.
I agree. It's through this process of questioning, of
Yeah.
digging deeper, and of listening to those silenced voices. Yeah.
That we can gain a more complete and accurate understanding of the past.
Right.
And that understanding, in turn, can help us navigate the complexities of the present and build a more just and equitable future.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles and famous figures.
Yeah.
It's about the choices people made,
Right.
the consequences of those choices,
Absolutely.
and the lasting impact of those choices on generations to come.
And it's about recognizing that the past is never truly past.
Yeah.
Its echoes reverberate through time, shaping our world in ways we may not always perceive.
Right.
By engaging with history critically and thoughtfully,
Yeah.
we can begin to untangle those echoes and gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Well said.
Thank you.
This has been a truly thought-provoking deep dive into the Glorious Revolution.
It has.
One that's challenged our assumptions
Yes.
and left us with a lot to ponder.
A lot to think about.
To our listeners,
Yes.
we encourage you to continue exploring.
To keep questioning
Yeah.
and to never stop seeking out the truth,
Absolutely.
even when it's uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Until next time, keep those brain gears turning.